Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's topic is Pathways After Doctoral Education with our panel of postdoc alums and PhD alumni and current postdocs. Very excited to have you all here. Thanks for joining us. So without further ado, let me throw it over to Dr. Roseanne Di Maria Galili to introduce herself and the rest of the panel. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Darren, for introducing us and kicking us off. We are happy to present this panel today, and Dr. Grija Kamal and I will be co-moderating for this afternoon. Our panelists we're happy to have back visiting with us is first up is Dr. Carolina Brill. She is an alum from the Creative Arts Therapy program and also did a postdoctoral fellowship with us. Dr. Abby Gilman from Nutrition Science, again, a double alum, PhD in nutrition and a postdoc a researcher. Dr. Justine Sekchek, who did her postdoc with us in 2020 and is now here on faculty. And Dr. Laura Gomez-Suhet, did I get that correct? Great, who is a new postdoctoral researcher. So we're really happy to have you with us. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Kamal to start us off.
Thank you so much, Roseanne, and welcome everyone. We are really happy to facilitate and share these perspectives with you. As you know, we have a doctoral program. We also have a postdoctoral and research staff community. So we are really excited to learn from all of you today. So the first question to our panelists, starting to sort of share your reflections, is, would you tell us, reflecting on your transition from the, postdoc or PhD to your first position, what went according to plan and what didn't turn out as expected? So maybe we can start with you, Carolina.
I just transitioned about 4.5 months ago, so it's still a fairly new transition. So I'm not sure if I can answer what did not turn out as I expected. But what turned out great is transitioning to a robust research and very active research community in the hospital, in the big hospital setting, which allows me to really focus on science and not to focus on many other aspects, right? Or like those that not having too many distractions. As an international scholar, I think what was a big aspect for me, what went according to the plan, was also the aspect of visa and transitioning the visas to a new institution. And I learned that, the bigger the institution or the stronger the institution, this process is actually very easy, is not lengthy. So that's something that definitely turned out great. And I'm gonna pass the torch. Who is next?
Abby, do you want to go next?
So are we talking about the transition during our postdoctoral time or the transition away?
Transition away.
Okay, so nothing went according to plan for me. Not nothing, it's just I didn't really have a plan. I knew that my plan wasn't to become a faculty member, a tenure track faculty member. And figuring out what was next has been and was very challenging. So I think that transitioning away from the postdoc was definitely made me think about what it is that I want to do and what priorities I have, and where I want my career to go at each phase of my life. So I guess I'm sort of figuring out the plan as I go along. And that can be daunting to not know the direction. And I guess it's a little bit of a work in progress. What has gone well has been the connections that I've been making and the network that I've created and have been continuing to create. My current position was, I found out about it through American Women in Society mentoring group. So making those connections early on during my postdoctoral work was really important for me as I started to transition into my next role.
And to be noted, both of you did your postdocs here at Drexel, right? So you did your PhD and you did your postdocs with your mentors.
Yeah, I actually did 2 postdocs at Drexel. One was more of a quantitative work and one was a qualitative study with different advisors.
Yeah, and I do remember at that time you were like, I'm done. I need to head out somewhere. Yes.
Yeah, I'm still working my way out. Yes.
Thank you, Abby. Justine?
Yeah, so in terms of transitioning from postdoc at Drexel to faculty here, I think a lot of things went well. I had written a K-23 during my first postdoctoral research fellowship, which was at another university. And the first time it was scored, it was about 4 points out of funding. So that was really harsh. And I took the Drexel postdoc to have this new opportunity to really focus on aging and behavioral interventions. And that's really where I want my career to go as a behavioral interventionist. So it was great to have this opportunity to come over at Drexel. And prior to coming right over to Drexel, like a month prior, resubmitted that K-23. And so then I got a very fundable score on that resubmission. And so moving that to Drexel was a bit challenging. So several sections of the grant had to be rewritten to move it from my previous institute to this institute. And Roseanne helped me a lot with the budget. I remember that was a big ordeal because a lot of things had to change with the budget because every institution has different numbers for direct cost, indirect costs, and all of that. So I remember that being a challenge, but I think it's been pretty smooth moving on to faculty. I think it's gone as expected.
And you knew all along that's what you wanted, correct? This was your pathway.
Yeah. So I, when I left my career working in administration in a nursing home, I knew I wanted to go into research. And so I knew that already going into my PhD program, that I was really interested in going into academia. So I think this followed suit, that I was prepared in my PhD program, prepared through my postdocs to have a faculty position on the tenure track.
Thanks, Justine. Right. Lara?
Hi. So since I am already a postdoc, I am a postdoc yet, so I can only say about my path after I finished my PhD. And what I did, I feel like maybe a lot of people do the opposite, like they do the postdoc first and then they become a professor. What I did after I finished my PhD, I applied for a non-tenure track position in a private university in Brazil as an assistant professor. So everybody was thinking that I would follow this career and then become an associate professor and then a full professor. And suddenly I decided to do my postdoc. And so I used to be a professor in Brazil. I was a professor during almost 1 year, and then I applied to come here. And I started my postdoc training 6 months ago. I arrived in October last year. And since now I am a postdoc and trying to figure out next steps. So that's what I did after the PhD.
And you are working with Deepta, right?
Yes,
Dr. Sukumar?
Dr. Sukumar, yes, that's it. And we are doing a pilot study. We just started to recruit, and it's a pilot study that combines creative art therapy and nutrition lessons. And we are trying to understand if the combined method can improve cardiometabolic health and psychological well-being in postmenopausal women. And that's what I'm focusing right now. And
Lara's done a phenomenal job with recruiting and posting for our study.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right.
I do want to say, Laura, that you're not alone, in taking a different approach to a postdoc, because that's the path I took. I was a tenured professor, associate professor, and then we moved from West Virginia to Philadelphia. And I wanted to really pause and rethink where I wanted to go next in my research. And I took a postdoc position, and that really helped me, then move out of that and into Drexel. So You know,
Yeah.
people do that, and it's not uncommon.
Yeah, I really felt in that time that I needed more experience in research since I was only teaching. I love to teach, but I miss a lot of research in my life. So since my final goal is to be a scientist here, I felt that I needed more experience in research, and then I needed to apply for a postdoc and continue my training and have like more experience here, and then apply for another job that I need to figure out if I want to continue in academia or if I will transition to industry, or maybe I will do both. I don't know. So that's what I am now.
Great. So I'm going to pass it back over to Carolina to talk about, you know, what is your current role? What research opportunities are you hoping to explore?
Sure. So I'm still not in the fully independent position. I transitioned into the research associate position, in which I'm going to be for 2 years. And now thinking back about what didn't work in the transition as well as I wanted to, I can add that I'm a dance movement therapist, and my passion lies with dance movement therapy and bringing and producing more research into this field. And the problem is that there are very little opportunities for researchers, and especially for dance movement therapy researchers. And there are almost no academic positions for us in the United States, or very little in Europe. And therefore, finding a position matching dance movement therapy with the population of your interest is really, really hard. And that happened to me. My population of interest was chronic schizophrenia and severe mental illness. And I am doing mental health and dance movement therapy, but in oncology settings. So I had to pick up items that are really important to me and somehow manage to bring them together. And I'll share one piece of advice that I received from one of my mentors, who said that, you know, at this point of your career, you just do what you need to do to make sure that you produce and that your name and your profession is recognizable. Then when you are a full professor or you have your tenure position, then you can go back and do schizophrenia, right? Or then you can go back to something that, you know, you're really interested, because it's very hard to, we need to think about what is feasible, right? And where the opportunities might be. So right now I'm working on developing a dance movement therapy research program in the hospital. And that's amazing. And I'm very passionate about it, especially that our field do not have that program yet. So dance movement therapy stays. It's just a little bit different of the population.
Great to hear. Can you share with us where you practice?
Sure. I'm at Sloan Kettering Institute in New York. So Memorial Sloan Kettering has a hospital, which is a clinical site, and also Sloan Kettering Institute, which is the research site. And I'm at the Department of Integrative Medicine Services.
That's terrific. So you're at a really rich research environment. So that's a really great benefit and a strength, right? To
Yes.
be in a setting.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Well, terrific. So I'm going to pass it over then to Abby.
So my official title is the Research Grants and Compliance Manager at Bryn Mawr College. Bryn Mawr is a traditionally teaching university, but they do produce some research. And in my role, one of my primary positions is to run the IRB in terms of the administrative side of the research. So with that, I have the opportunity to kind of read and review all of the human subjects research that is conducted here at Bryn Mawr College. So it's been a really interesting opportunity to see the breadth of research that is occurring here, and something, they don't have any nutrition program, which is what my training is in, but to see the variety that's going on and to really understand the ethical components of human research. That's actually been very fulfilling so far. to make sure that everybody's research is within our compliance of protecting human subjects. And this was something that I've submitted protocols to our IRB, but I never really saw this back end of things. It was always the Drexel IRB. It was, sometimes dealt with a lot of frustration. So it's good to see the other side of this and to understand the why behind a lot of the paperwork and the procedures and the protocols. So that's been interesting and fulfilling in a sense to be able to understand research in a different way. I'm not doing any of my own research. And as I said, there's no nutrition or really any health sciences at Bryn Mawr College. But it has been, I'm fairly fresh in this role. I've only been here for 3 or 4 months. But it has been nice to be able to see, again, the variety and a lot of the whys as to how we protect human subjects in research. Yeah.
That's great. And, we'll probably circle back with you in a year from now and see what that journey is like. And as you, move into your role and feel more comfortable with implementing the research administration side, because that's really critical to the research enterprise, right? And so I think when people think about careers after a PhD or a postdoc, they think either academia or industry, but there's also research administration. And so, there's lots of opportunities in that, even to be scientific review officers for all the different funding agencies. So
yeah, there's I was quite nervous going into this field. Again, this was kind of the first job that kind of worked out and fell into my lap, but I was quite nervous going into a field where it wasn't required to have a PhD or it wasn't the standard. But my boss and her colleague and basically everyone that I interact with all have PhDs in a wide variety of fields. So this is kind of something that I really didn't know existed as an opportunity. Again, I'm not sure if this opportunity, this direction will be where I end up, but it has so far been really interesting to see this whole world more than just the compliance, but I'm also starting to dabble in some of the grant development. So finding grant opportunities, working with both doctoral students, postdoctoral fellows, and faculties to really develop their grant searching and their funding opportunities and developing their own interest letters and aims and things like that. So there are definitely opportunities that I wasn't aware of entering into research administration. So that has been fulfilling so far.
I'm going to pass it on to Justine.
I'm sorry, can you remind me the question? I know we were still
I
on the
know
last
you well
one.
enough that was what you were going to ask. But what is your current role? And well, I think you described that. And what research opportunities are you continuing to explore?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm an assistant professor here at the College of Nursing and Health Professions on the tenure track in the graduate nursing department. And research opportunities. So I do have the K23, that's a nursing home study looking at residents with dementia and persistent vocalizations and introducing a nature-based intervention to see if that'll decrease the vocalizations. And so I'm working on getting that study started. It's a little bit delayed because of COVID and all things have gone on. In the meantime, I had gotten some pilot funding from Cell to Society Network, and we've conducted interviews with older adults living in the community to find out about their outdoor activity engagement and how that changed during COVID. We did complete 18 interviews with the older adults and just presented on some of this data last week. And a prelude, these were really physically active older adults, and they continue to engage outdoors during COVID, and even more so because they feel as retirees, they have more time on their hands and they weren't too nervous about exposure to COVID outside. So that's one project I've been working on. With Dean Gitlin, I've been attending the NIA Impact Collaboratory meetings, which is a funded initiative through NIA, the National Institute of Aging, looking at pragmatic trials for persons living with dementia. And so with that group, we have a couple papers under review right now. And I completed a systematic review of systematic reviews, which was a lot of work. So I've been very busy during the pandemic, but that paper was recently accepted, and we looked at what interventions there are for formal caregivers, dementia caregivers out there, and which are effective, which we found that there's really no good interventions that we could recommend out there, but there seems to be some promise in teaching formal caregivers about communication skills, person-centered care, and so forth, but more research really needs to be done in that area. So I think that'll be an impactful paper for the field.
Great. Thank you. And Laura?
So I am a postdoc researcher in the nutrition department at Drexel under Dr. Deepta Sukumar. And as I was explaining, we just started a pilot study called Integrative Intervention with Creative Art Therapy and Nutrition, which is a 16-week combined method randomized clinical control trial. And we are trying to understand if we combine the methods, we can improve cardiometabolic health and psychological well-being in postmenopausal women. And beside this project, it has been a wonderful time to improve my research skills, which is something that I was really interested in learn more, like different methodologies, learn from a different research group, understand the IRB, because in Brazil, we do a lot of things different. So this is very important for me too. And I know that during the postdoc, we have to do a lot of networking. So I'm trying to understand how can we network online, because things during the pandemic are happening online a lot. What else? Oh, writing during the postdoc, we write a lot. This is a huge part of the postdoc training. So I'm helping Dr. Sukumar with her grants, and also thinking about project proposal for fellowship applications, abstracts in scientific conferences, and writing papers. So there are a lot of writing as well. And right now, like I said, I'm trying to understand my next steps. So I'm using a lot. I don't know if the PhD students here know that my IDP from Science Career website, and helps a lot to understand your skills, your abilities, what you're interested about to work in the future. And this website combine all your answers and gives you the opportunities after the postdoc that best matches you. So I'm reading a lot about this and all the career paths that I can choose after the postdoc. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Great. Arisha, turn it over to
Yeah,
you.
actually, Lara, would you mind the link you mentioned? Would you mind just popping it in the chat so people can access it?
Of course, it's very good. It's a very good tool to understand your skills and what you're interested about, and also how do you imagine yourself, like an ideal work for you, an ideal job for you, what's gonna be. And then the website combine everything and gives you like more than 20 different job opportunities that you can read more and understand if you feel that that's something that would make you happy. So it's very good.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so how has your program of research grown since your postdoc or graduation? And if you're not in an academic position, how do you continue to integrate lessons learned on research into your current role? And I know some of you have already spoken to this, but maybe if you want to delve deeper on if you are doing research, how it's grown, and if you are not, then how are you using lessons learned from your research preparation in your current work?
Yes, I am still doing research. I had to transition to a different population, what I said before. So that was and still is going to be a lot of work to learn about different population. Definitely what helped me with that was while I was in a postdoc position at Drexel, I work in various roles for studies of Dr. Yoko Brad's studies, which are around cancer populations. So that definitely served as a bridge. But other than that, I am still continuing and wrapping up the study that I received the funding for during my last year of postdoc from the Cosful Foundation. So kind of doing a study fully independently was a great experience, and doing it in a pandemic was a very hard experience, and a lot of lessons learned. So the research program is growing. But what I wanted to say is that I incorporate a lot of different skills that I learned in the postdoc in my current position when I'm advising other teams, when I'm working with other teams. Being in the role of study coordinator helped a lot to see aspects of study oversight from multiple perspectives, of being able to communicate clearly with the team, being able to distribute the work between within the team. And also, I feel lucky that I feel my research program was, my research development at Drexel was strong in a sense that I learned a lot, and I can see that it's not true to everywhere, I think, and it's really nice to see those skills learned in practice in a different setting outside of Drexel, when I assumed everyone knows that, right? So so being able to use those skills is feels good.
I'll piggyback off of that, because I think a lot of what Carolina said is true, is that using the skills of research is kind of the backbone of where I hope my career goes. I am a dietitian. Before I got my PhD and did my postdocs, I was a clinical dietitian. And I think I will always be a clinical dietitian. But what I really learned in my academic career at Drexel was how to be a researcher and how to take multiple methodologies and apply questions with those methodologies. And I think moving forward after my stint in research administration, I'm hoping that my career goes someplace where I can use my skills as a researcher and apply them in different ways. I've started networking with people in fields very much outside of nutrition and even health and wellness, to find ways to use my skills in research and evaluation and apply them in new and creative ways that may better support where I hope my career and long-term goals are headed. So I am still in academia, but I'm hoping to kind of wiggle my way into a different world, but still use those key skills that I developed and grew as a postdoc and as a researcher to kind of forge my way in a different direction.
Thank you. Thank you. Justine or Lara? Yeah.
Sure. So I mentioned my K23 study, which is a feasibility, acceptability, and preliminary efficacy study. And so I'm starting to think about the next steps, which would be an efficacy study. And so I'm networking with my colleagues and getting copies of their R submitted grants so that I can see what an R looks like. I signed up to be a research participant for a program funded through NIH, where you get a grant writing coach. And so you are in small groups where people give you feedback on different parts of your material, and a network developer. So somebody working with me to help me develop my professional network. So that's been really fun. So I'm thinking about next steps. So sure, we don't have all the data collected for the study yet, but thinking ahead, like what is the next study? And some of the other work I mentioned about the NIA Impact Collaboratory. So it's really around implementation science. And so having opportunities to work on those papers, even if I had a small section that I had to write, I really had to do a lot of reading to understand the literature in that field. And so that's been a great training opportunity for me. And then the other thing that's been really nice being here at Drexel is that I have new collaborators now. And so I've been working on different projects with people. And some of these are certainly pilot projects, but hopefully that will lead to bigger studies in the future.
Great, and thanks, Justine. The importance of being connected to a network or a group, right? So it's not just your unit, your supervisor, your colleagues, but you're also connected with a larger potential pool. So that's something really important, and everyone should really be paying attention to that, to be part of a network or a group that you could step into eventually. Should you move on from one institution to the other. All right, Roseanne.
Great. So I think everybody touched on this already, so we may get to question and answers quite quickly, but how has COVID impacted your work? I don't know who wants to jump in and start. Maybe Justine, we'll start with you this time.
So I think I've alluded to some of this. So the major study got delayed a bit because it's really hard. Still, the nursing homes are still suffering with COVID and short staffing and all of that. But I was able to get a pilot study where we were able to do either interviews on the phone or by Zoom. And so that I think a lot of researchers have pivoted to is working with the community dwelling older adults, where we can do these virtual type meetings. And so that has unintended consequence of the pandemic is that a lot of researchers have gone in that direction. And I actually presented last week on this with a qualitative interest group, and how all the different qualitative researchers had to work with their IRBs in terms of every IRB is a little bit different about the requirements. And for instance, we got a waiver of written consent so we didn't have to get the older adults to sign something and email it back. And, so we were able to work through that. And, I think a paper is going to come out of this, of lessons learned of qualitative researchers, or at least working on a qualitative study of how we've had to figure it out ourselves. There's no literature to tell us how to do that, and how things have worked either with individual interviews or focus group interviews.
Great, thank you. Carolina?
Sure. COVID impacted my study mostly in terms of recruitment. And so my last year at Drexel, I was funded to do a feasibility study of telehealth dance movement therapy intervention, which is a 10-week program for people who do have chronic schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder and are outpatient. Connecting during the pandemic with different sites, it's a very difficult endeavor, especially if you cannot go there and physically talk to physicians or nurses or therapists. So recruitment was I think one of the hardest parts, and I struggle with it. I did not reach my recruitment goal yet. I have 2-3 more months to do that, and I do not think I will reach the recruitment goal. But lesson learned, I learned a lot of different approaches and techniques on how I can, what different strategies for recruitment I can come up with. And the second thing that I learned is really connected with the population that I work with. It's very hard for patients without the pandemic, it's strenuous schizoaffective disorder very often have difficulties with motivation, with adherence to treatment, with showing up to support sites and so on. And during the pandemic, despite that they feel the need to connect and fill out and counteract the social isolation that happened, the lack of motivation and decreased adherence and decreased adherence was even stronger than before pandemic. So I had people who would start 3-4 sessions and then they would not continue because they were just tired, or because they had to move, or other reasons. So COVID impacted this greatly, and I feel like I would if I was my own advisor before, I would advise myself that I do need to be connected to a site, strongly connected to a site, to be able to do research with a population that has many different difficulties in terms of general functioning, which I didn't know before.
Hindsight's always 20/20, but I think that we've all experienced challenges during this pandemic of recruiting individuals into our clinical trials and studies. I have, and you always think it's just me, and and woe is me, but then you talk to other people and you find everyone is experiencing the same challenges. So it's a little bit comforting, but it may also make us think a little bit differently about, what are the final products of those projects that we started, right, during COVID? Because if we can't reach that end, how much longer can you keep moving forward? So we may need to be a little bit creative in writing up our results and our findings. So Abby, I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead, Justine.
I just want to add one more thing, because I do see Arun's on the call too. So I think using our tools that we have at the university for recruitment, is a big deal. So I used Research Match, which I know several of you on the call have used, and that was a great way to recruit participants. But that being said, it led to a biased sample in my study. So we had a majority of white participants, even though this was a very diverse database. We led to highly educated participants. 3 of my participants had a PhD. And so these are people who want to be in research. And they were all tech savvy because they use technology. But another but to this is that as somebody who attended a recent talk that I gave on the methods and using Research Match said she had a much more diverse group of people through Research Match. So I think it depends on your questions as well. But I think in COVID, these times of COVID is using the resources that we have if possible to recruit people.
I agree, and most of my participants came through Research Match, but I think it's a great tool, but it's not great for every population, I think. So
if you need a specific clinical population,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
So Abby, what were your trials?
So my COVID experience, I guess, so in the beginning of COVID, I was already on a remote position. So my postdoctoral fellowship with Dr. Jennifer Quinlan was already a remote position because we were recruiting from around the world. Around the country, and we used Research Match a bit and snowballing, and that was fine. But really what I took from COVID is that I really like working remotely. I have 2 very young children, and the remote capability has been amazing. If I never had to go back to an office, I wouldn't be that upset. And so I think that was my biggest takeaway from COVID in terms of my own career needs. So COVID has positively affected my figuring out my path in that regard, is that I've learned a little bit more about what I need from a job and what I don't need. And there is something to be said. I miss having coffee breaks and things like that. But at the same time, for this stage of my life, COVID remote work has been a wonderful thing. In my current role, I'm in the office at least 3 days a week, and yeah, I don't prefer it. So that's what I've really learned from COVID so far.
Yeah, I think everyone has their own preferences coming out of COVID. So, and at least we can have hybrid environments, which is terrific.
Yeah.
So Laura, you're muted, sorry. The phrase of the day with COVID.
So COVID got me. I was in the middle of my PhD, so it didn't impair my data collection. However, I couldn't do a lot of analysis that I wanted to do. So the university closed and my lab also closed. So several analyses that I wanted to do, and I was expecting to find like incredible results. I was working with a children population, so I wanted to dose telometer length as an inflammatory marker. And I think the results would be incredible, but I couldn't do. So I needed to change some goals of my dissertation, and I finished my PhD at home. So it was good because I was able to do this. Several of my colleagues couldn't. They waited to the university to open again, and then the lab start again and to complete the PhD. But I was able to do because during my master's, I worked like double, like a lot, and I had many data that I didn't use to complete the PhD. So that's what I did. And right now I feel that COVID is still impairing my work, because we started to recruit, but it's been like a slow process to find people that they want to come to the lab and then do the blood draw and stay there. I feel that this woman, they don't feel comfortable enough. And right now COVID is increasing again. So I feel like it will be a process that will take a long time. But besides that, thank God we are all alive here. Yeah, so that's it.
I think we're going to have waves, right, of periods of where we can get in and recruit and then think about hybrid modes. So yeah, it's going to be challenging until this is all died down. So Girija, I'm going to turn it over to you for the last slide.
All right, so wrapping it all up, looking back and looking forward, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself, perhaps your younger self or any of the selves in the audience here?
I'm a thinker, so I'm not sure if I know this answer right away, but maybe something for the participants who are really interested in a postdoctoral position, advice for them, if that's okay. I would really encourage everyone to reach out to that university if you're interested in the postdoctoral research position and who is in charge of that position, and try to develop a relationship with that person prior to even applying, to see if it's a good fit, to see if that could work out. When I was leaving my PhD program, I flew around the country applying for and interviewing for postdoctoral research fellowships. So I had one in the Midwest, one on the opposite coast, and they all seemed like great positions. But I think the people who ended up getting them had started to develop a relationship with the people that held that role or had the funding for the position. So that just a bit of piece of advice that I didn't realize going into that I should have reached out ahead of time, got that person to know who I am, know my name, and so forth. So it would have saved me a lot of time and money, I think.
I'll go on top of that, of Justine's, because I think my advice to myself would be the same, is to start early in networking. For me, it would be network with people who you wouldn't expect to have to network with, kind of go outside of my little bubble. For a while, I was in a little Drexel bubble, and I had a little bit of Philadelphia community health sprinkled in there, but really to expand my network, to build off my network, to do a lot of informational interviews early on, to find out about people, about their jobs and their career paths, find out what was interesting about it and what wasn't, and what skills I was crafting and creating that would potentially go in that direction. And along with that, beyond just networking and creating that network, but keep track of the network. I wish I had created an Excel spreadsheet 10 years ago of all the people that I've met and what I talked about, and where I met them, and where they were and where they are now, to be able to circle back. So definitely to start early and network and find out who I am by figuring out who other people are.
I can add on top of that from the first year of the PhD, start thinking strategically so you can so you kind of map out where you want to go and where you want to be and what you need to achieve along the way. Even if it moves, even if it changes, that's fine. But having a clear goal that's feasible, specifically feasible, it's going to be helpful. And even though you might be passionate about something, or you might be passionate about something, maybe that's not the best way to go at this stage of your development or career. And when looking at the postdoctoral positions, I think what is important is that when you do the informational interviews, or when you apply, really make sure that the position will allow you to work on your own science, and not just in the role of coordinator for the study or something else. That there will be a protected time for your own work, which is not always possible or not always true with different postdocs. It depends on where you are.
Thank you. Themes of networking and themes of focus on your own journey. And Lara?
Yeah, I think I would say plan ahead. That's something that really helped me. So think about what you want to do, what you're passionate about, and plan ahead. Don't wait to network in the end of your PhD. Don't wait to publish your PhD like after you already completed and after 2 years, because this will not help you. Plan ahead, think about what you want, what you're passionate about, and do now. Don't wait. This is really helpful.
Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you all. So lots of insights, lots of experiences shared very generously. So perhaps we open up now for questions. Any questions from our audience members, which includes postdocs and doctoral students?
Hi, this is Martha. I'm sorry, I have background noise. My kids are on spring break, so it's chaos in my house right now. I don't really have any questions. I really enjoy this because I've heard Justine's path, because she and I work together a lot. So it's nice to hear like how other people have transitioned through the program and what their experiences were. So I just wanted to say that I found this really helpful, because I'm in my 3rd year, and depending if I get funded on my F31 or not, I'm either going to graduate next year or the year after. So I have decisions to make. So it's good to know to start doing this a lot earlier than you anticipate. So I just want to say thanks for the.
Thank you, Martha. Anyone else?
I'll jump on. This is Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering what highlights or kind of tips you can provide in terms of doing that search for a postdoc placement. What were some of the highlights that they've started to trickle in my inbox here and there, but I'm just curious what your experiences were.
One thing that I would recommend is Twitter. They get put on there a lot, and personal networks. So if you could tell your mentors that you're interested in a postdoc, that's how I found out about this Drexel one, was through my PhD and mentor. So I think a lot of it is networking.
Can you say more about Twitter? I wouldn't know where on Twitter to look.
So yeah, that's a great question, because I don't use Twitter that often, but I talk with my colleagues, and there always seems to be drips and drabs, and then a huge wave of postdoctoral research fellowships in nursing. So it's like feast or famine. It's hard to find, and so start following research centers of universities that you're interested in. That might help. And then going back to growing your network. So if you meet people at conferences, start following them on Twitter, because if something's offered in their university, they'll typically share it, and then somebody else shares it. And then so you could see that across your network. I'm not the biggest Twitter fan, but others might have better advice than me. But that's where I've seen them.
I would add to that in LinkedIn. I've created a very strong network in LinkedIn over the last couple of years or so. And I don't know if they go hand in hand, LinkedIn and Twitter, but I definitely have built and grown my network in LinkedIn.
Thank you.
I'm gonna just to answer Catherine's question as well. Another, and following on what Justine mentioned, if you know different research centers, sometimes there's training grants that some of the centers have, and they look to fill their postdoc positions. At Drexel, for instance, the Autism Institute is always posting for postdocs. So they're posted on the regular job boards of different universities. So as a regular staff position, it just depends on how the position's classified at different places. So those are some ways of thinking about looking for a postdoc. I don't know, Parisia, do you have any
No,
thoughts?
I'd just add to that. I mean, think of all social media also as another form of networking. So, if I share professional things mostly on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and if I see opportunities, I've had people apply from those opportunities. I would also think about where you want to go. So, who is someone who you really look up to, or who's doing work that you're sort of interested in, the institution, the individual. I always lean towards the individual because someone who can sort of mentor you is more important than the institution per se. So I did this when I was doing my postdoc. When I was doing my doctoral work, I moved from Boston to Philadelphia, and I was looking for a research group to be part of. Out of the blue, I contacted someone at in the psychiatry department at Penn. We kept in touch, and then she had an opportunity. I ended up being a research project manager for her. So, and a lot of this is really organic, and there is no, I wouldn't say there's a formula to it, but to be connected in as many networks as possible is usually a very good idea. Online networks as well as sort of professional meetings, things like that, while holding on to the idea of what is it that you're really looking for? What kind of experiences are you looking for? And who is sort of doing things that could potentially fund you?
Catherine, knowing that you're a creative arts therapist, I would also suggest to think outside of the box. So to look for people, positions, places outside of creative arts therapies that would definitely open up more options for you, that you can incorporate creative arts therapy, or creative arts therapy could be a addition to something else. Yeah, so just think outside of the field.
That's a great suggestion. You want someone who's friendly and open to your field, even if they might, and the overlap might be in the content, or in your case, early childhood development, who's doing early childhood development and sort of invested and curious about the creative arts therapies or art therapy.
Yeah.
All great suggestions.
Yes, thank you all.
Anyone else?
And I'll just add, conferences is a great place. It's been harder in the virtual environment, but in person, sometimes the universities have booths that you could go to, or they might post their flyers somewhere, or word of mouth. So that's huge. And during special interest group meetings, somebody will share that they have the opportunity available, and sometimes they have flyers with them.
And I would say, there's what you are willing to do and what you are able to do will vary across life. So sort of, accept that flow and change too. That things will keep evolving, things will keep changing. What you want to do will possibly change as well. And in each position, make sure you're growing, you're learning, and you're moving towards the things that you want.
Any other questions? Any final words? We have four minutes left.
Yeah, from our panelists, anything else? Right, I guess we can wrap up.
Thank you. That was terrific. Thanks, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks so much to our alumni panel, and for Garisha and Roseanne. we'll see you guys next week at Tuesday Topics. Thanks. Bye-bye.
All the best.
Thanks,
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Thanks, panelists.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Everybody.